Welcome to Innovate Her with Yaritza, the podcast that dives deep into the inspiring world of women of color in the edtech industry. It's raw and authentic. There is no format, right? The best kind of professional development and conversations are those that are unscripted. Welcome back to Innovate Her, the podcast that spotlights bold women redefining leadership across the globe. I'm your host, Yaritza, and today's guest is a true change maker. As an international speaker, leadership coach, and the force behind Empowering Learning and Leaders to Excel LLC, she's shifting mindsets, leveraging data to transform schools, and amplifying voices from every corner of education. Join us as we unpack her journey, her wins, and her wisdom for women of color stepping onto the world stage. Dr. Chaunté Garrett, you've built empowering learning leaders to excel from the ground up. Would you kick us off by sharing who you are and what fuels you today?
Okay. I think one of the things that defines who I am and what fuels me is I'll tell people I'm Alice and Bobby's baby, the youngest of six. And I think one of the things that I had to lean into when I accepted one of my most significant leadership roles that also led me to founding Empowering Learners and Leaders to Excel was my foundation. And that was being a child of parents who were educated during segregation leading up to integration. And so, my father was educated in a Rosenwald school. And one of the stories that I learned from my family is that he was the first Black bus driver in his community, and his responsibility was driving the Black students to school. And he was denied his diploma when he refused to stop driving the Black students because they expected him to drive the white students. It was later rectified, so be told by her high school counselor that she wasn't college material. And she would go on to be a beacon of hope for her community by earning her bachelor's, her master's, and being the first in our family and one of the first in her community to go on to earn a doctorate degree and be the first doctor of education that I would know. And one of the things that became paramount in our household is that education is liberation. Education was our keys to opportunity. But what also became prevalent was that education was key for community, and particularly for Black people. When you had that education, it couldn't be taken from you. And although there would still be challenge, you could navigate those challenges to other opportunities. And we needed that. And you grow up and you see difference, right? And so I became somebody who wanted to help people navigate systems and work through difference, and also mitigate systems so that kids and communities could work through difference and see opportunity. And when I say that also became one of the fuels for building Empowering Learners and Leaders, because I built it out of a lot of the challenges we saw coming out of the pandemic, and particularly with leaders, and particularly around the rhetoric that we saw coming through that time, where we saw one, we couldn't have operated literally the world if it hadn't been for educational systems, right? We needed schools to operate. So we saw where schools and leaders were being held to higher systems, but then we also high regard. But then we also saw when it wasn't doing exactly what we wanted to do. We also saw where they were literally being torn down. And we saw all of these negative narratives come out when we were doing literally the best that we could in what was over and over again being classified as unprecedented times. So I really wanted to create space for leaders to have support to do what we knew was right for kids, use resources, think differently, think boldly, and keep doing the hard things to get great work done for kids, and feel empowered in doing it, and know that they had really significant and great support, and feel empowered and keep the work going even through challenging times. And that's how we built Empowering Learners and Leaders to Excel, and we're still here, still getting it done.
Still getting it done and doing things the right way. But you just touched on so many things. Like, I was just like, hold on, she's answering all of my questions without me even asking.
That's all right. We're going. It's big. It's bold.
Yes, it's big, it's bold, it's unfiltered, but honestly, it's realistic. And for many people of color, not just women of color, that's our experiences, that's our history, that's our family's history. For myself, I wasn't born in America, right? So when I've had conversations with people who are just like the discussion of segregation and the civil rights movement, and I always emphasize, my family has always lived in Panama. And before that, we were enslaved Africans, like literally from Africa to Panama. That was our voyage. But as a history teacher and as a US history teacher, I've always tried to emphasize that although my lineage kind of like stopped in Panama for a while before we were the first ones that came to America in 1991. So like it was me and 11 of my other family members. My mom would always say, right now we're not a part of this community, right? Because we weren't. We were immigrants. We spoke Spanish. As a dark-skinned woman, I didn't know where to fit in, right? I do not look like most of my cousins. And so I would always tell her, well, I'm a little too Black for the Hispanics, and I'm a little too Hispanic for the Black people, because anytime my mother would speak out loud, they're like, all right, go upstairs, or, go back on the boat. But she would say, when you learn a skill or you learn some knowledge from school, people can't take that away, right? They could hurt your feelings. They could talk junk about you. They could talk smack about you. But when you sit down and you learn and you teach yourself, or you are in front of that teacher, you make sure that you learn and you take in every single thing that person, that adult in front of you is showing you, because when you get older, nobody can take that away from you, right?
Take it away.
And as you were speaking, I was like, okay, I'm not American. Well, now I am, my citizenship. But we have those same experiences where, like, I know in my family, my mom was the first one to graduate college in Panama. And although it was so difficult for her to have her transcript recognized in America, she made it very clear. I graduated college, and so you have to do better than I did, right? If we're really going to build a legacy and we're really going to say that we came to this country for something, you have to make it meaningful. You have to make it.
It's not an option, right?
It's not an option.
It's just not an option.
It's not an option. So I know you touched on the pivotal moments that sparked you to create your organization, but is there kind of like a defining moment early in your career, maybe a challenge or even like a mentor encounter that sparked your passion for systemic school transformation?
I think there were so many. Like, the pastor references this several times, so I'll never forget it. And I mean, I remember it. He says, she was 12 years old telling people she wanted to be a superintendent. And I was. And I have a mentor from my college years, and she was my SGA advisor. And she says, you came to North Carolina A&T saying you wanted to be a superintendent. But my desire to become a superintendent was my desire to be in a position to impact that change, right? To be in the position to ensure those changes happen. And so there were so many things. And I know it was being in a household that the conversations were happening. And they were not only happening about me, for me, but about my community and being involved in the work in the community, right? And so it was, knowing that my mom was actively involved in trying to make sure that I was not bused all the way across the county, right? And so as a kindergartner, kindergarten and first grade, I was bused all the way across the county, and my mom was actively advocating for me to be able to go to the elementary school that was 4 blocks away from my house, a magnet student. And she tells a story. Now, I was not cognizant of it, but she, I know now, as her as a high school teacher and my brother being in high school, they were getting home earlier than I was off the bus as a first grader, as a kindergartner and a first grader. And she had to get her principal at the time to support her in her request in getting me moved. And it actually took 3 school moves for me to finally get to that school, right? So imagine if she didn't have the support that she had, right, at the time. Right. My best friend, who's still my best friend to today, we met on the playground and we were the only African American kids in our classes. So we became friends at the playground, right? When we got to I think she was already based there, but we just drifted together and we are still friends today. I don't know that it was a trauma bond, but it happened and God knows I love her to death, and we've been ride or die since first grade.
I know that's right.
Our moms are our moms, right? And, but, being very cognizant of being the only until you weren't, right? But I knew I was the only, but I also know the kids in my neighborhood weren't in my classes.
Uh-huh.
So, I remember being in middle school and the kids in middle school were like, we don't see you. We get to school, we don't see, the kids in the neighborhood were like, we get to school, we don't see you. Where you
Right.
at?
Not in the same classes.
All of that kind of, and it's not because they weren't, because now, mommy has advocated and helped me get into academically gifted classes,
Yeah.
right? But I've also had to, like, there were other classes like pre-college programs and those types of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so now I have been differentiated other in different types of ways. And it's not because these kids weren't smart too. I had somebody who knew how to work the system.
Yeah.
Right. So I remember like what these different programs, like I'm trying to remember, the name is escaping me, but I want to say like Kiwanis or something like that. And I'm 12 and 13 years old delivering these, scholarship driven speeches or whatever. You win these different club programs. And I'm delivering my speech on how unfair the busing is. That I have these opportunities and other kids in my neighborhoods don't have these opportunities.
Wow.
Right. And so those are the types of things that were on my mind at such an early age because I'm seeing the disparity, right? I came up in a way that I was very keenly aware, that the difference between my seat in the top 10 of the class and another young lady is the weighted GPA.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things. But that's because of the conversations and the upbringing. And I know that I had a very strong educator advocate in my household,
Yes.
right? I wrote my dissertation on academic achievement gaps. The video I posted today spoke about academic achievement gaps. It's something that's very passionate of mine and it dates back to the way that we began the other kids 30 years ago.
Yep.
Right? We've been talking about academic achievement gaps for a long time. And the way we
Very long time.
standardize testing is one of the original othering of children, right? And it's my community that brought that to the forefront for me. And that's where the advocacy for me originally began. So there's so many spaces for me. And even in my career, my first year of teaching, I walked through the door and thought one thing was happening, and I received kids that I did not expect to receive, but I'll love those kids forever. And we got it done. Tell people we came out the gate, 93% of those kids passed. But what happened was, even though 93% of those kids passed, and I recommended a lot of those kids to go to honors classes, when we got back the next year, they did not place those kids in honors classes. And when I questioned the kids, why are you not there? Another colleague had told them that because they did not make a high enough grade or something, that they had recommended them to do something else. I said, but they didn't teach you. I taught you, and I made the recommendation. So it's the silent, it's the things that are unspoken and unwritten, those codes and things. And so those are the things that I built my advocacy, my career, and trying to change the systems.
Systems led by the powers that be, because
Yep.
as you said, you had the resources, right? You had someone who would advocate for you, who knew this isn't right. I don't want my daughter being bused to another district when there's a school up the block. And there's so many kids that are still dealing with that today, right? I know in New York, we no longer have zone schools, but there's a whole bunch of charter schools that are popping up that are basically saying to our students, you can't get admitted to here right? But we want to take everyone else that has these 98 and 99% GPAs, and we want those students, and I want to keep you back and take the funding from your schools as well. So I'm
Well,
seeing that.
exactly. How we opportunity schools, and how we place students in them.
Mostly students of color.
Mostly students of
Students,
color.
students
And when
of
you're looking at the research, right, high needs schools, low performing schools, and even when we're looking at the staffing of those schools, they often have the least qualified teachers. And even, one of the things that I'm working on now, like one of the keynotes, one of the projects, one of the keynotes in one of the workshops that I'm running now, what will we build? Because it's not just for schools, it's also for communities, right? When we're having this conversation and you're looking at that particular aspect of it, because that hasn't changed. As long as we've been doing this, high needs, low performing schools still often have some of the lowest qualified staff. And what's one of the things that got taken away first? Professional development, teacher development, right? And what's one of the things that gets commented on? Merit.
always,
Always,
always.
right? So how are we, right? You've heard me say over and over again, right? I had a resource, I had an advocate, right? So how are we going to be resource, advocate, and still and build something for our kids, our schools, so that they're not under resourced and we can mitigate the impacts of what is happening and eventually going to be the excuse of not achieving whatever this metric of merit is.
I agree. I think we have to do a better job at being intentional. I know my reason for going to education is because I knew what it felt like to be isolated in the classroom. I knew what it felt like to be in an ESL classroom, although I was very, very, very fluent in English. But no one had, sat my mom down and said, hey, she can test out of this, right? She can sign out of this. And it wasn't until I literally became a teacher that I was like, oh, okay, they're making a lot more money from students who are in ESL or native classes. So of course, no one is going to, sit down and acknowledge that one, there's an issue here. We have this girl who came to America fairly early and speaks way better than most of the teachers. We're just going to have her sitting in ESL from
And that's an
K
area
through
that we
12.
just began to develop. That
Mm-hmm.
is an area that we just truly began to invest in developing
Yep.
with the growing populations of English second language students.
And those classes, I mean, if I think back to my experience, and I've said this before in keynotes, where I've taken native classes, and I know that the task is supposed to be, or the mission is supposed to be for the teacher to help the students acquire the English language and then test out. When I was in native from grades 9 through 12, we only spoke Spanish in the class. It was so weird. And they put all the Spanish speaking students in the same class. And I would come home and I would tell my mom, this is weird. They're not even teaching them English. And my mom would say, well, what's even more weird is that you're in that class and you're taking AP Lit. That was even more weird, right? But you don't really begin to question things until you realize that it's not supposed to be this way. And even when I began to advocate for anti-racism and culturally responsive education, when I began my work with Microsoft and Microsoft Flip on thinking about what it looks like to have a board of people who look like me to say, oh no, this is definitely not anti-racist. This is not inclusive. This is not what defines equity. This should not be put out. Then you begin to think, why aren't we exposed to these things, especially in our communities? I'm from Bed-Stuy. I grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, my parents
Even
met in Bed-Stuy.
Listen, I love Bed-Stuy. I was just there on Saturday. I was just there for my daughter's birthday on Saturday. But I also have to acknowledge that there's so many schools that are failing in Bed-Stuy because no one is standing up and saying the money is being placed in places that we don't need. I love AI. I really do. I love AI. I'm an advocate for EdTech integration when it's done the right way. And I feel like some of leadership focus has shifted to everyone wanting to just be viral on social media And no one's really considering the fact that our kids have been struggling to read for so much in so many years. And we need a lot more support in that area. Literacy has always been one of those areas, especially for children of color, where we need a bit more support. So if you are going to leverage AI, why not leverage it to help with literacy? Right? Why not leverage it for things that our communities need? A lot of my family workshops are literally just that. I've leveraged AI with families to advocate for themselves and think about what Title I funding is. Hey, ask the chat bot this question, right? Be more critical. Ask it what are some resources that you have in your community that you can use to help boost the literacy level and your comprehension level of your students.
Yeah. But that's really powerful, the work that you've done with Uniondale to do work with families.
Thank you.
Like that's critical. Because trying
Thank
to
you.
do this work without families is,
That's
you
that's
know,
that's that's it's kind of like impossible,
it
but
really is. And I think
it's
one of the
impossible.
things, one of the things, and, I've been guilty of it, when you're, and that's one, and I think it's also one of those pandemic symptoms, right? Like
Mhm.
there's just like this overwhelm, and it's trying to get all of the things, juggle all of the things back in order after they've been really crazy, right? And when you keep the main thing, right, and getting them right back in order, right, you got to do the work with the families.
Yeah.
And so I was real when I saw, the post and things going up and that work that you did with Union Nail. I was like, yeah, like I probably couldn't like put up those green like celebrations. No, on LinkedIn because it's the right work. It's
Thank
the
you.
right work. And I know like we could get disappointed at not enough families.
Mhm.
But enough families will share with enough families.
Listen, they're showing up because it's choice, right? Like when I do these family workshops with the districts prior to the actual AI workshops,
Mhm.
I ask, what are the options for parents? Are you just saying we're going to do this workshop today and you have to come because it's the topic? Are you giving them a drop down menu of, hey, these are 8 topics that we would like to do this year? What are some topics that, or ideas you have? And when we first began with Uniondale, it was like, hey, we need some ed tech workshops, but we would love for you to come in and ask the parents what they want. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, survey the parents. And then what we'll do, and this is what I love about Uniondale, while I'm in the workshops with the parents, there's normally 4-hour workshops on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Uniondale has events for the parents to bring their kids.
Right.
So the first 2 hours, the kids are in there with us and the kids are learning the tools. The last 2 hours, the kids are off playing games, they're doing activities, the school is watching them, and then they come back for lunch. That's strategic. A
That's
parent doesn't have to worry about leaving them home. They don't have to worry about who's going to babysit because the school is saying, we got you covered. We got you covered.
I
You
love
got
it.
breakfast, you got lunch. We're learning together for the first 2 hours. So most of my sessions for the first 2 hours is always kid-friendly activities. Let's look something up. Let's look up cookie recipes, right? So that they can show their parents, let's go to code.org. Let's do a dance party. Let's code it. And then, all right, y'all get out of here now. Let's talk business with your parents. And let me show you how to use these AI tools at home or for work or to help with your
Yeah.
calendar or next events.
I love it.
Um, to make it more relatable. But once again, we have to be intentional with how we're doing the work with our communities, right?
Yeah. And we got to use it for the story, right? Data is a story, right? And I remember like during the pandemic, we we flipped the script on schedules, right? Because we knew what our story was. And if we were going to have kids in seats, right? If we were going to have parental support, then we had to align what instruction looked like to meet our families, right?
Mhm.
So we were running school from like 7 in the morning to like 6 in the evening because it had to align to what our families needed and what our teams needed during that time, right? And so it wasn't we're doing school, from 9 to 3. It was
Right.
this classes happened in blocks, and this is when kids showed up because teachers had needs, families had needs, folks were still having to work third shift. It just didn't happen in that typical trying to run a typical day kind of deal. And yeah, there may have been a data sacrifice, but there was a community need at stake, right? that got us through that time as a community. Yeah. Like you've got to meet your folks where they are.
You have to. I've heard, and I've been engaged in a lot of conversations with leaders here in the United States and in other countries, and we all use the same line of meeting parents where they are, families where they are, and educators where they are. And then when I do an observation, or I'm sitting in the conversations and I'm going, somebody didn't meet you where you are. There's like this false expectation that adults we can do it all, but I believe that it's from the assumption that no, we all have access to resources that we don't have access to, or we all have access to skills that we don't really have access to. And like you said, right, we're meeting families where they are. So if that means starting school early and ending school late and just doing it in blocks, that's what works for your community, and that's the story that your data was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they appreciated it so much, right? The flexibility, the ability to be present, the staying in place, right? It worked.
It worked.
It worked.
It worked. And that's why you're like taking on all of these stages, because I wanted to ask you about that too. You lead international workshops. You're guiding educators and leaders through these data dives and data discussions. And honestly, to tell anyone or to share with anyone about data, sometimes that's an uncomfortable feeling for people who you may know that you need a lot of support. But if Dr. Garrett is saying, look, have you seen these numbers? And what have you done? What's the story behind it? What's your reflection, right? I know they're probably like,
oh my gosh,
you here to help, but dang, you gonna tell me this? But what I wanted to ask you is, where do you find the confidence that fuels all of this, especially when you're on the big stage?
You know, that's a great question. The confidence, I just lean into, I'm a very faithful person. I do this thing with God every single day, and I have. That's my source. I give him the glory for it. I really do. He's definitely kept me through it, because it's you're right. Data is really personal, and so we do start with norms. And I laugh because I've literally walked into places, like I really hope in most cases that when I'm walking into a new district and new spaces, that we do get a chance to have like great introductions and great starts and feel goods and all of that stuff. And it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you see me the first time that we get started, right? And I've already looked at your data. And I ain't coming in to judge, but you already feeling some kind of way. And I'm still not coming in to judge, no matter how you feeling. But, so we are norming. And one of those norms is, this is not the person. This is about the story that it tells, right? So what story is it telling, and what are we going to do about it, right? And that's it, right? And so, but when it comes to the confidence, really, there's nothing in it that's about me. I literally do this thing with God. And I do lean into my protocols, right? I wholeheartedly, and that's one of the reasons why I really sat with, like, where in developing Reset, like, where has success lied for me? Like, when we talk about, when you were in the classroom, what was your success? When you were an instructional coach, what was the success? When we, were killing it with growth, when we were killing, what was the success? Like, and what is that protocol? And that's really how I developed Reset, right? Like, what's the strategy behind it? Because, and I really needed to like lay that out. Like, how are we, was like, we're not just going out here willy-nilly, right? We really sitting with this. Like, how are we, let's spend some time, reflect, let's spend some time and evaluate. And so when I walk in with folks, that's how I'm coaching them. Like, we're not just jumping in, like, okay, like this doesn't look good, so let's go. Like, no, let's sit. So tell me, like, we walking through some reflection protocol, right? So tell me your story. Tell me
Yeah.
your story from your perspective. What's happened here? What is the dynamic? And tell me after you've processed it, evaluate, okay, so give me the other parts of the data. Tell me the parts I don't see and I don't know. And let's put the picture together, right? And then let's begin. Now that we have a clearer picture, you've told me the pieces I don't see in your data. Let's get some research together and let's begin to strategize a plan. Okay. And then we're going to start executing and think about how we're going to track our progress. And through that, when I'm coaching people, right, we're leaning into that confidently too. Because in that coaching process, I'm not, because the other part too is at this point in my life and my career, I ain't been out of shape out much.
Right. Hello.
Energy is currency, honey, and I spend it really wisely.
Mm.
Listen. So we
Oh,
going back to the plan. Like, did we follow the plan?
right.
Right. We get
What we doing here?
right. Did we deviate from the plan? If so, okay. How we getting back on track? Like, all right. Did we? Right. Okay. Just checking.
Listen, I know.
Right. Okay. And
I
we checking
know.
our progress. Okay. If our progress is off, do we need to just making sure? Okay. All right.
Listen, so one of my first clients, and they're still my clients now, is P-Tech Brooklyn.
Mhm.
And the principal is the founding principal of P-Tech schools. And Rashid Davis, he's really big on data. Like you come in the morning and I'm happy-go-lucky. The same way I'm on this podcast, if anybody knows me in person, I laugh, I giggle, I'm walking through the hallways like it's my school. Knowing it's not my school, but I'm like, hey, nice to see you. And I'll go see him and he hands me like, girl, it'll be like this much paper of data and pictures. And he'd be like, check that out and let me know what you think. Regardless of what it is, I'm like, all right, Rashid, you have to give me some time to eat my bagel. Because whatever I'm about to say, either you may want to hear it, you may not want to hear it. So you gotta let me eat first. Because darling. But every day, he's a data person. And every day he's speaking to the data. He's saying, okay, well, what can we do differently? All right. And so last year's focus, like literally from September to June of this year, all I did with his administrative team is take them on data dives.
Mhm.
What does it say about our L's? What does it say about our students' disabilities? What does it say about our families? Okay, we got 60 families to come to Saturday's PD. How can we change this and make it to 80? What can we do differently? What are the suggestions that are being made by parents in our, reflection sheets or our surveys? So when you said it's more than just numbers, and it is a story. For me, it's also, are you listening and paying attention to the story that's being told? Or are you just going to ignore it? I always say to teachers, to students, and even to other administrators, if I'm here, it's because someone in your building thought it to be beneficial for me to assist. And so if you need to lean on me as hard as you can, lean on me. But I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we can walk through this together. But I just need you to know you're going to hear it from me, right? And it might sting a little, but the truth stings. And that's the only way that we can literally resolve this problem or come up with a plan to help resolve this problem.
Well, I tell people, I said, look at me as your extra eyes, ears, and hands, right? Like I am, and that's like I said, when I set out to do empowering learners and leaders to excel, is not just a vehicle to tell people what to do. Like I'm in it to win it with you. So consider me your extra set of hands in this as well. Like we're getting hands with, not just like hands on, like hands with you, right? Like so let's get in here and do this. Like your additional support person. But one of the things I also realized too is even leaders, and particularly this year, but we've been doing it 2 years now, but having completed a full year, um, the modeling piece for leaders too, right, has been critical this year. I have done more modeling for the leaders this year, I think, than I did for teachers over the last 2 years. And it's been absolutely critical. But yeah, like, that confidence piece, I don't know that it's I haven't thought about it as confidence.
Yeah.
It's just been absolute. And I will tell you one thing has been true, particularly this year. It has been and I came across a prayer and it has stuck with me all year, is something to the effect of wanting to make sure that I put my service at the forefront, right? So even more than confidence, I think it's just making sure that I am walking in and I'm serving the way that God would have me. So, before the prophet, before the, that it is, and I have like just making sure that, God, as I'm walking into this, that I am serving the way that you would have me to serve here.
That's powerful.
Thank you.
That is powerful. That is you living in your truth and you holding yourself accountable for doing it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many things that I have prayed for in starting this. Because I came, I came to this, I very much came to this divinely, very much so. And so I have just really wanted to walk this out with him, and he's allowed me to do that. He really has. I'm grateful for it.
We're here to see it and to support you and to back you up and to see you shining. All right. We're like very close to time. So I want to do like a 2-minute game and then I have another question for you for closing remarks. But
Okay.
we're going to do a game that I'm just going to call it like a global leadership showdown, right? So in other words, would you rather? I'll give you 2 scenarios and you choose which one you would rather do. Are you ready?
Okay.
So this is a game of would you rather, and I'll just ask 2 different scenarios because I know like we're almost hitting 50 minutes.
Okay.
So, would you rather negotiate an international partnership over coffee in Paris or host a cross-continental virtual brainstorm with 5 time zones?
Ooh, coffee in Paris or international brainstorm across 5 time zones? Okay, 5 time zones because I've been to Paris.
I will pick the same. I haven't been to Paris. I've been to London. I haven't been, but
I
I
have
would.
to get to London.
You would love it.
Yeah, I
I
got to
had
get to
so much
London.
fun. I had so much fun. That's a conversation for another time.
Okay.
Would you rather mentor young principals in Tokyo who are adapting to AI tools or coach school leaders in Nairobi integrating local community insights?
If I had to do it today, I'm headed to Tokyo.
I would do both. I don't know. I would have to find a way to do both.
I need Kenya to settle down a little bit. Right
Listen,
now, I need Kenya to settle down a little bit.
listen. Once again, that's a conversation for all.
Right.
Listen, because I'm supposed to be in Nigeria in 2 weeks, and I had to change that whole trip up.
Yeah.
All right, so we're closing out, but I wanted to end with a question, and this could be your message for women of color who are already in leadership roles, who dream of
Oh.
sharing their insights on global platforms. What's one piece of advice you'd offer to help them raise their voices louder and prouder?
One piece of advice that I would offer to help them raise their voices louder and prouder. One piece?
You could get 5. You could get 10.
I
You
can
could
get
get
5.
100.
The first thing that's coming to mind is do it. I say do it because if it's on your heart, you need to go ahead and let it go because we have a tendency to suppress our own voice, and I know that it is part of a generational learning that we have that's kind of been instilled in us. But I think now we have a very pressing responsibility to ourselves and to those coming behind us to take these lessons and put them out in the forefront and begin to share them. So the first piece of advice that I'm giving is to do it. If you have something that you need to put out there, go ahead and do it. The second piece that I'm giving is that we have to start building, and it's attached to the first, but build your own. So you have a message, share it, but go ahead and use your resources to begin to build your own. That doesn't prevent you from building with others. With your resources, build your own. Because if you're waiting to build with others, you may have the opportunity to build or you may not have the opportunity to build. But with your own resources, you know you have the opportunity to build. And building with others, you can build more. And there's more there to do the third, and that is lift as you climb. And so there's plenty of sisters out there that can use the support, especially when it comes from another sisters. So one of the things that I share when it comes to empowering We're Ed. The other business that I have is, mentor and be mentored. And so, there's other sisters that need your support as you are being supported. Build your own, but lift as you climb. And then also, sisters, there's room enough for all of us to eat, right? And so we don't have to do harm to each other as we are, um, making our way, right? And so we can admire without, and we can correct without harm. And so do the work to make sure that we can figure out how to do both. And so I don't know if that was 4 or 5 or what it was, but
It was 4, but I feel like I'm gonna have to highlight all of these separately
I
because
lost track.
all of them, I was like, yep,
I
yep.
lost track, but hey.
But especially the last one, right? Like I feel like,
Honey,
and I
I
learned
can give you a
this.
whole episode on that one.
Listen, and I learned this. I want to say 6 years ago when I joined Microsoft. My manager was Journée Armand. She was who I featured in episode 1. And I remember like getting really close to her because 1, we're women of color, but 2, she would always say, do what you got to do, right? And I would always say, oh no, but you coming with me. Or if there's an opportunity she has, like my phone would ring and she would like, hey, this was happening in Georgia, or this was happening in New Orleans, get down here, or this is virtual. And we've always been like that. And so even when I started my own business, it was, all right, who else can I help? Who can I help uplift, their stories, or if you need a job, or if you don't need a job, but you're doing some really good work, I want to be able to amplify you. I want to be able to amplify your work because we're not in competition.
And
There's
you do
thousands
such a
of
great
people
job.
that are doing the same thing. There's thousands of people who are consultants. I feel like I wake up
Yeah.
every day on LinkedIn and it's a new consultant. Somebody quit and somebody now has their own business. But guess what? There's only one person that can do it the way that you do it. There's only one person that can. I know my
There's
PD.
thousands of consultants, but there's hundreds of thousands of schools,
Hello.
right?
Hello.
Listen, and even when it comes to us as educators, there are so many. And even when I say, like, I could do a whole episode on that, and I can tell you right now, and I would do no harm to any of those folks, even now.
Yeah. Yeah.
God bless them.
But and I know this is like a episode literally for next time because you got to come back because we got to have an episode on this, right? But it's that idea that as women of color or people of color, we constantly have to fight to get to the top. When I want people to understand, there's a lot of room up there. There's a
There's
lot of
a
room up there.
ton of room up there.
It's a
And
lot of room.
look, if we build our own, there's plenty more.
Hello. And that's how we're gonna end this segment, y'all. That's how we're gonna end this segment. You've heard it here directly from Dr. Garrett, y'all.